Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. I'm really excited for this video actually. I want to show you one of my new absolute favorite Hydra compositions. This one is so much fun to me. And one of the great things about this comp is that it's so easy and so straightforward and safe to one key hard Hydra difficulty. We're going to be using 5 epics and 1 legendary, and I can suggest to you as well some replacements for some of the champions. A couple of them are specific, but a bunch can actually be replaced. And really this comp is going to be all about Oboro today actually, but what was sort of inspiring for this, how I came to this, was from last week's video where we're looking at Berdal Fellhammer, and we're really focusing in on this idea of a mischief tank, right? If someone has more buffs than everyone else, they'll be targeted by Mischief. Mischief tries to steal the buffs and turn meter from whoever has the most buffs. So if we can get lots of buffs on a single champion, we can force Mischief to attack them. We build them with high resistance, and they can't get that stuff stolen. Now, Berdal's a great option for doing this because he puts counterattack on himself, which is a rare buff. He has it on every single turn. It doesn't need any books, so he's just so easy to get up and running doing this. So easy, so consistent. You put him with a blood shield ring, and then he's going to be counterattacking whenever he's hit. So whenever he takes damage, he counterattacks, gives himself a shield. So he's always going to have 2 buffs more than everyone else. It's so safe. The problem with Berdal, or the downside, that's the upside. The upside is the ease of use. The downside is he doesn't bring any utility really to your team. He just does single target damage, which is fine. It's okay. But can we find someone that does more? And there are several options, but in today's video, I want to talk about, I think she's just one of the coolest looking champs in the game, guys. Oboro. Man, that hat, it's so dumb, but it's so cool. You know what I mean? It's so good. But Oboro, yeah, she is a badass champion, and I'm so glad to be able to do a video on her. So what is going on with Oboro? Well, if Berdal is a good mischief tank with 1 buff and possibly 2 buffs with blood shield more than everyone else, well, Oboro is even better because she brings not 1 buff, not 2 buffs, not 3 buffs, but 4 distinct buffs on herself. It's absolutely crazy. Now, she will need to be fully booked up. Ninja Arts, her A3, increased crit rate, increased crit damage for 2 turns and attacks. If she crits, perfect fail as well for 2 turns. And I know you're saying, nubkeks, that's only 3 buffs. Well, her passive, revive on death for 3 turns whenever she receives a veil or perfect veil. So boom, 4 buffs. She's going to be giving herself revive on death, perfect veil, increased crit rate, increased crit damage. 4 buffs out of nowhere. And this is absolutely huge. Even one great thing, it's a 3-turn cooldown. These ones are for 2 turns. She's given herself revive on death for 3 turns. What is wonderful about this, revive on death is extremely rare. Not many champions have that. So yeah, there you go. It's a very safe buff that she will always have that most other characters won't have. And even then, increased crit rate, that's very rare too for you to actually bring. Perfect veil, when we're running with Inquisitor Shamael, is something you're not going to bring. An increased crit damage AoE buff is quite rare too. I mean, the likelihood is, and this is the nice thing, you can really change up your team. If you've got a non-Shamael team and you are bringing in like Rector, Drath, or Duchess who are bringing Perfect Veil, no worries. You're going to have the crit rate, crit damage, and revive on death. You could possibly bring in like Farrakhan the Fat, ally attack, or Archmage Helmet. Archmage Helmet gives you speed, crit rate, crit damage. No problem. She's going to have the Perfect Veil and revive on death extra. She's still going to be ahead. So that's what's wonderful about her, is all this stuff. And when we come to the team, well, one of the downsides of Berdal I didn't mention is that if he is relying on the counterattack buff, you can't bring counterattack, but with this team, with Oboro, we certainly can. By the way, what do her other skills do? Her A2, 3-turn cooldown, big smacking single target hit that can transfer debuffs, but she's going to be immune to them all. She's not going to have any debuffs. And then the first hit can steal buffs, which is kind of cool. So you could, for example, you don't necessarily need increased attack on your team. You can have her steal the attack off of Wrath and give herself increased attack because she hits really hard. Her A1 then, spreading chaos, attacks one enemy. This has a 50% chance but decreased defense. It does an AoE attack though if there's 4 debuffs on the target, and this is where she can really start to smack. And this is where the utility comes from. She can bring you an AoE decreased defense for your team, which becomes very nice. That is something that is going to be very rare, and it's a very useful thing for a mischief tank to bring. So how do I have her built out? You can see she's still in a bunch of level 15 gear. I'm just waiting for an artifact enhancement event, you know? But she's only got 36k HP and 1.8k defense. That's all she has, and she's actually totally fine with this team comp. We've got a lot of support in this team comp, so she's going to be good. You could increase these more if you wanted. I certainly wouldn't go below these. Bearing in mind, of course, Perfect Veil does give damage reduction, so it makes her slightly tankier than she appears to be. But I wouldn't go below these numbers. Her speed can be really low. She doesn't really need any speed. I'm trying to get her up to like 170 or so. I feel it's going to be a pretty good spot for hard. She needs 70% crit rate. She needs to crit to get her Perfect Veil and Revive on Death buff, so she needs to crit. And then I've given her a big chunk of crit damage, and then she needs lots of resistance. So for hard Hydra, we're really looking at, 420 plus. Even going up to 450 is going to be a good idea. I have her slightly too high here. She's almost like perfect for Nightmare Hydra at this point. But there you are. And then I've got her with about 232 accuracy. This is a perfect build here for hard difficulty Hydra. I'm going to show you the individual pieces as well while we're here. But I've got crit rate, and you can see you could really ditch a lot of this attack percent. The attack is a luxury to make her do more damage. It's a luxury though, you don't need that. So any of this attack percent stuff you could replace. You don't actually need it. But I've got crit rate on the weapon. We've got the random helmet, kind of. I need to glyph that actually. The shield has 2 rolls in resistance. We have crit damage, gloves, again with 2 rolls in attack percent. You don't need those rolls in attack percent. We have a resistance chest. That's going to be important to hit your resistance thresholds. Attack percentage boots with 2 rolls in resistance. You could replace those with HP percentage boots if you need her to stay alive. And then we have her probably in a defense ring. Yeah, a defense ring with 2 rolls in attack percent. Again, this is a luxury, but it's nice. She's got good base attack. Crit damage on the neck, the necklace. And then a resistance banner. So that's how we have her built out. And yeah, she's going to have really high crit damage and all the rest. Let's dive into the run, guys. Let me actually show you how this works. I think this looks like it's running. Yeah, we're running plenty fast here. All good. So I was recording this on my phone. I was sitting up in my bedroom. I was watching, just chilling this evening. I was watching some Star Trek Voyager. And I was like, you know what? I'm enjoying this team so much. I want to show you guys how it works. So who do we have in this team? What is the idea here? The idea is, right, Deadwood Jedi, he likes to give like cool names to his teams, like, the White Whale and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, ooh, that's cool. Or like Batman Forever. So I want to call this one something really cheesy after Oboro. So I want to call it the Deft Blade that cuts the wind. Or maybe the Deft Blade cuts the wind. I think that's suitably corny. So I like it. The idea is very simply that, Oboro, she's like this Eastern sort of ninja girl, and with counterattack and all this resistance, she just keeps dodging mischief, and look at this, counterattacking and throwing it back, right? It's just, she's super agile. But yeah, so what do we have in here? We've got Oboro. Of course, the key of this team, I know I'm going to get comments about this because I get on some of the other videos. It's like, yes, we're using Inquisitor Shamael and Geomancer. But trust me when I say that people are using Inquisitor Shamael and Geomancer teams, and they're still struggling on hard. They are. Well, this team is a really, really easy way to get it done. Super easy. Inquisitor Shamael is in there though, so we remove all these spheres from the Head of Torment, and then Geomancer is in the lead. He gives us more max HP with his aura, which is nice. The main thing, of course, he gives us that damage reduction and reflects it back on the heads with these burns. He gets tons of turn meter from Shamael, which lets him burn multiple heads. He just does lots and lots of damage, and because we're going to be running counterattack in this team, he has an AoE A1, so those AoE counterattacks are just fantastic. Boom, you see that? There was Oboro with her AoE A1 slamming out the damage and putting decreased defense on everyone that time. That was quite lucky. And it's pretty cool, right? It's pretty cool. Now, the other parts of the team, obviously, we've got Oboro. And just, you can see the sheer amount of buffs that she has, guys. Look at all those buffs. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. So many buffs. Here she goes. Bam! A1. Love it. But she's in here with all these buffs. She's tanking mischief. She's providing decreased defense and just doing pretty good damage. You want to always play it on manual, and you want to always target a head that has 4 debuffs. You always want to trigger the AoE A1. Always put on her buffs first. Make sure her buffs are still on, and then trigger the AoE A1 after that, if you can. That's sort of the priorities there. And steal buffs if you need to steal buffs, but you probably won't need to if you've got the sort of builds that we have here. So she's in there. She's doing her thing. We have on the far left, we have Skullcrusher. What's he doing? He's in and he's giving us counterattack and also ally protection. That's what he does. So the ally protection helps everyone stay alive. And the counterattack is just going to, again, with Oboro having an AoE A1, with Geomancer having AoE A1. Now, you need to be very careful. Actually, I'm going to interrupt myself. At this point of the fight, when Oboro gets eaten, look at this. This is where it's scary. The reason I put counterattack on there is because I knew I had this coming up. There were no cleanses coming up. We had Hex on the Head of Mischief, so Geomancer could guaranteed steal those buffs off. What you will want to do, be very careful. It's the one thing you have to be careful of with this team, is when you are coming up to Oboro being eaten, don't put counterattack on until you are sure that you can handle it. And then when she comes back, you again need to be careful. You kind of need to wait until she takes a turn. Wait until she takes a turn in a second here, and you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll see the buffs just shoot up because she should have her buffs ready to go. And part of what makes this, though, consistent, and you can prepare for it. Here she goes. Ready for this? Wha-bam! All the buffs. And suddenly she's back mischief tanking again. Just like that. So good. It's so good. What was I saying? I can't remember what I was saying. I've lost my train of thought completely. I don't know. Oboro is good, I guess. But yeah, anyway, Skullcrusher, he gives us that ally protection. He gives us the counterattack, which is great. We have Godseeker Aniri. She's the only healer. The only healer in the entire team is Godseeker Aniri, guys. We just don't need that much healing because we have so much protection. But she is in. And the nice thing that she does is she also extends buffs. She also does pretty decent damage with defense. And we have increased defense from Mithrala. So that's another part of it as well. But yeah, Godseeker is going to be perfect. And by extending those buffs, it gives you so much safety. I actually think you don't even need to extend the buffs with Oboro, but it just gives you a ton of safety and it just makes it stress-free. Like you don't even need to worry about, am I precisely speed tuned, or will the buffs fall off at the wrong time and blah blah blah. You don't need to care about that. It's like Oboro is always going to have all the buffs and it's literally no problem at all ever. So that's really nice. Yeah, Mithrala then coming in, she's another big key to this composition, though there are replacements for her if you haven't got her yet. But Mithrala is just perfect for this. She's going to do some nice damage with poisons, especially on the counter-attacking. The poisons can be pretty good. She gives us increased defense and increased attack, so she's going to up the survivability of everyone. That increased attack is going to give a lot more damage to Oboro, Geomancer A1s, Inquisitor Shamael. The increased defense is going to give a lot of damage to Skullcrusher, to Godseeker Aniri. So it's kind of a win-win. And then she gives us strengthen and a big shield and cleanses debuffs too, which is just fantastic. One thing we actually did with this comp, and one thing you can do if you're going to bring in slightly different champions, is you can sit down and you can add up your buffs, right? You can actually spreadsheet it up and make sure that you don't bring probably more than 10, or just be careful about bringing more than 10, because if you start bringing like, I don't know, it'd be hard to bring too many buffs, right? It's hard to bring too many, but if you do, you can run into a situation where you might get 10 buffs on everyone, and then the Head of Mischief will target someone at random, I think. So just watch out for that. But yeah, she's great. In terms of alternatives for some of these champions, you can absolutely replace some of them. Now, Inquisitor Shamael is going to be really difficult to replace. If you don't have him, he's probably the most irreplaceable one. Well, I guess you can kind of replace almost everyone, but it sort of just changes the composition entirely. Like, to stay true to the core of the composition here, this sort of Oboro comp, yeah, I'd say Inquisitor Shamael's pretty damn important. You'd have to bring Perfect Veil instead, which could work with a buff extender like Godseeker Aniri to keep you covered. It just might get a little bit awkward, but it could still work. But Inquisitor Shamael makes it much easier, and Geomancer makes it much easier. You could, in theory, put any like damage dealer in the lead. So like Yannicka from the clan shop would be a great option. Probably Mother Cybele could work, anyone that's got like those AoE A1s that can just sort of spam them out is probably going to be pretty good. Or really any damage dealer. I guess they're going to outrun counterattack if they're in the lead with Inquisitor Shamael boosting them. So it doesn't even matter if they got the AoE A1s. Big smack from Oboro. Nice. To replace Mithrala, Mithrala can be replaced by, I'd say the easiest replacements are champions that are very, very similar to her. So I'd say Sigmund, the high shield, would be the best one. Sigmund also brings the big shield and strengthen on his A3. Almost the exact same move as Mithrala, just doesn't have the cleanse component. Then he has an AoE decrease attack. So we don't have decrease attack in this comp. So he'd bring you decrease attack to sort of simulate the increased defense that Mithrala brings. So he's quite similar. He's a good option. If you don't have him, Brogni as well is a really good option. And if you don't have them, it gets a bit more awkward, but you're basically looking for champions that can keep you alive, preferably with shields and stuff like that. But these champions are really good, and part of what makes these champs so good as well, you know what, actually, Tutora Rhymehide could be pretty good too. He gives everyone Perfect Veil, increased defense. He wouldn't be terrible. The idea is that because we have a Mischief tank with Oboro that's so successful, we can just come in and bring the best buffs in the game. We can bring in, we can bring in counterattack. We can bring in Brogni buffs. We can bring in Mithrala, and they're never going to get stolen because we got a Mischief tank. So we can stack these crazy buffs. For Skullcrusher, he's the least important one. I mean, it's just really fun to have the counterattack stuff. And the ally protection is very helpful, but it's not essential. You could replace that with anything. Obviously, I think any of the 3 counterattack champions would work, and you could tweak your comp then to make up for it. So, for example, if you had Valkyrie would be great. With Valkyrie, you might not need this shield and strength then that Mithrala or Sigmund brings, because Valkyrie gives you such a big shield. So you could bring something else. Yeah, if you had Martyr, she brings you decreased defense and AoE decreased attack, and also brings you increased defense. So you might want the shielding, but then suddenly, increase, the strengthen and stuff wouldn't be so important. So you can definitely tweak it. You can absolutely tweak this in different ways. Godseeker, you could bring anyone that heals, really. I think Godseeker is the best because she does pretty good damage with that increased defense that we are going to have with this team. And extending buffs is just really good. But you could bring in Demitha, could work. I mean, you could even potentially tweak up the team and bring in like a Sandlash Survivor at some point. That could work as well, and give up the counterattack for some buff extension there. But I would recommend bringing in someone that increases buffs. So Demitha or Godseeker would be sort of the go-tos. But yeah, as you can see, we're absolutely slamming through. I think you might struggle a little bit. You might struggle a little bit if the Head of Torment doesn't come back, but you can still absolutely do it. So I'd say Head of Blight is the one you'll struggle with the most. If you're fighting Head of Blight and there's no Head of Torment, it's really going to slow down your damage because it's going to get Poison Cloud up and everything. We don't have any block buffs. And if there's no Head of Torment to give Geomancer lots of extra turns, you're not going to be able to get up multiple HP burns either. And especially if Head of Decay is in there. So if Head of Decay and Head of Blight show up and there's no Head of Torment, that can definitely slow you down a good bit. You just want to try kill off Blight as quick as you can. But you can certainly do it. It's just going to be a bit more. It's going to be a bit more of a pain, right? It's going to be a bit more of a pain. So that might be one of your reset points. Or also possibly if you aren't paying attention, you put counterattack on, and counterattack gets spread by Head of Mischief. When Oboro gets eaten, then that can go wrong too. And there's always, of course, a 3% chance that Head of Mischief does steal buffs off of Oboro. But with this sort of team, with Mithrala in particular, Mithrala Geomancer doing the steal thing that we showcased earlier in the video, it does give you a way back in. And of course, Oboro can steal buffs as well. So that gives you another way to deal with it too. Oboro can still steal those buffs as well. But here we go. We're pretty much coming up to the end of the run. And as you can see, we just sailed through this run. There's really never a point we were in any danger. We're just super safe. Boom. There you go. It's the one key hard. Pretty much effortless. We absolutely sailed through. Super easy, super clean. A counterattack composition with Oboro, Mithrala coming in as well. Yeah, I thought this one was really, really great. Hang on, give me 1 second here. If I show you, here we go, perfect. So I did this actually earlier in the week with different stuff as well. And in this run, this was like a couple of days ago when I first got Oboro, so she had less gear. Well, when I first geared her up. But you can see this one, we did have the Head of Blight, and it was also recorded on my PC, so it probably looks a little bit better. But with this one, we similarly absolutely smashed through for that one key. But I did have some slightly different builds when I first did it. So just to show you, like Oboro, for example, Oboro had worse stats slightly, and that totally worked as well. So just something to be aware of. And we had a different build on Inquisitor Shamael. I'm going to show you the builds that I'm using now. Where's Shamael? Oh, man. Yeah, so I had him in Triple Cruel. I've shown this build in other videos. So I switched them up for today's video. But with these older builds, it actually worked just fine. So we had a much slower Oboro, and it worked totally good. So there's really a range of builds that you can do. Anyway, for the builds that we actually used, Oboro, she's coming in built like this. The keys really being like 70% crit rate. High resistance, enough accuracy to be landing our debuffs. We don't need too crazy much. And then just a bit of tankiness. Speed is fairly optional. Attack is optional. and crit damage is optional, but she really smacks hard. So it's just too fun not to bring it. That's one of the appeals of bringing her. Now, I built her like this. This left-hand side down to War Master, I would definitely go with. Now, you could go down support tree. That's totally okay, right? Getting accuracy and even more accuracy. Getting bonuses from Lore of Steel. Grab Cycle of Magic, and then get better chance to place debuffs and extending those debuffs to really emphasize basically her decreased defense move. I decided to go defense tree for a bit more resistance. We're going to get less damage from AoE attacks. This is actually quite a fun one. Solidarity, more resistance for each buff placed on them by this champion. She puts 4 buffs on herself, so she's going to give herself 20 more resistance with this, which is, I think, pretty great. You know, if you want to use her for higher difficulties, or if you're doing hard like this is, but you're struggling for gear, can be really good. And then counter-attacking stuff is great as well. So that's where we went with her. Godseeker is built very, very similarly, really, but she just has some turn meter boosts instead of deterrence. It's not too important, really. And she's, I every time I show Godseeker, I'm like, I need to rebuild her. She's in this super generic all-around build. It actually works really well in this team. Her health is very low for a reviver. You'd want that to be higher, really. But she's got high defense, good speed, and she's got good crit rate too. So she actually does pretty good damage with this in her regen set. Oh, I didn't mention Oboro sets. I did. Stone Skin's great though. I put her in Stone Skin for some resistance. Any set that's giving you resistance or accuracy is probably good, because you do want to hit those breakpoints on resistance and accuracy. Inquisitor Shamael, I showed you the other build I used when I did the first take of this video. This is what I've changed him to now. So his attack is way down and his crit damage is way down, to just ensure he's not going to be eaten first. And he's got really high HP. I've given him 60,000 HP. And that's pretty much it. He just has really high HP. That's basically it. And he's in a Guardian set. So we just go, you know what? We don't care too much about your damage, dude. You are just there to not die and to help the team stay alive. This is not necessary for hard, but it is nice. Like I said, I also ran him in Triple Cruel, and it worked just fine. In fact, maybe it was slightly better for hard because he did more damage. But yeah, this totally works. It's totally good. Who else do we have in there? Of course, we had our Geomancer. So I did put in the tanky Geomancer I have in Deflection. Really not important. Reflex is by far the best set for Geomancer. But just decent HP, decent defense. You want him to have good speed and good accuracy. And that's really it. Good speed, accuracy, and tanky. And boom, you're done. The other stats are a nice luxury. And then, of course, we have Skullcrusher, of course, coming in here. And you can see, again, for some of these champions, they've got pieces of gear that aren't fully rolled up and stuff like that. But Skullcrusher, he's coming in. 200 speed, so he's pretty slow. You can probably make him a bit quicker. He's got good, solid HP, and he's got very high defense as well. Good crit rate. Now, avoid crit damage, and he doesn't need any resistance or accuracy for this team. But be careful of crit damage. Crit damage increases the damage you take from ally protection, which makes no real sense. It's just a really weird coding thing, but it is how the game works. So really try to avoid crit damage, but a bit of crit rate's nice, so he at least does something. He doesn't put counterattack on himself, so he doesn't do. He's mostly there just to give you counterattack and to survive. And I have him in Stalwart set, reduce damage from AoE attacks. I think that's pretty nice. Put him in some sort of defensive set like this. You just want him to try stay alive. He's the most likely one to die because of ally protection. So yeah, just watch out for it. At the same time, if he does die, it's not that big of a deal. It's terrible to say. It's not that big of a deal because he's not that crucial to the team. The counterattack is just, kind of fun and obviously adds up to a nice chunk of extra damage and a nice chunk of extra Shamael turn meter boosts from all those counterattacks with AoE, the Head of Torment. And then, of course, the final piece was Mithrala. Mithrala, I have her obviously in really good gear. She's so insanely good. You want to put her in really good gear, guys. So you want her to be nice and quick, nice and tanky, and then you obviously stack tons of accuracy on her, right? Tons of accuracy, which ups her resistance as well. So she's way over budgeted really for hard Hydra, but it does the job. For her masteries, it's really an arena type build. So something like this, but it's kind of flexible. Did I show you all the masteries on everyone? I think I did. Oh, with Shamael? I didn't show you Shamael, but he's kind of come into this sort of traditional War Master counterattack stuff. Giant Slayer does make him do more damage, but a lot of that damage goes into Head of Torment, which you don't necessarily want. but I don't know if it's that big of a deal, really. Or I feel like they're both similar. I might do some more in-depth testing at some point, but I feel like they're both pretty similar. And I don't think I talked about Skullcrusher, but he's built like this. Again, it's not really that important, but you know, the defense tree to help him stay alive with some counterattack stuff is nice, and then just down into War Master as well. But yeah, there you are, guys. Geomancer, if you wanted to see that, I show him basically most of the Hydra videos, down into War Master, and then obviously grabbing all the support stuff to make his A3 better. But there you go, guys. What do you think? Oboro. Hey, who would have thought it, right? Who would have thought it? When you look at this champion with 800 base defense, 1400 attack, the last thing you're probably thinking is she is the definitive tank, right? But she is. She is the mischief tank, tanking with grace, tanking with dexterity. The deft blade cuts the wind. Yes, that's the name. Cool. Guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.